So this session is going to concern something called the birthday problem. So let's go ahead and create a new file, and I'll talk you through it. Let's turn off caps lock. Turn on nums lock. My toddler was messing with the keyboard earlier. Birthday.py. Okay. And basically it's this. It's a well-known problem in statistics, which basically says, hey, given a group of n people, like the 150 so people we have in class, what is the probability that two people share the same birthday? So grab any two people in the class, ask them, and what is the probability? Or sorry, not grab any two people in the class because that would be just the size of two. But out of 150 people, what is the probability that two of them share a birthday? Or if you grab 100 people, what is the probability that there's a shared birthday? Okay, and this is something that, and the answer is kind of surprising, sometimes called the birthday problem or paradox for that reason. So what we're going to do is, the statistics on that are a bit difficult, but or they can be a bit unintuitive unless you're familiar with the term pigeonhole principle. So what we're going to do instead is simulate it using a Monte Carlo approximation, or Monte Carlo. So basically what we'll do is that we will generate a list of random people, specifically by their birthdays, and then we will proceed to see if we have a match or not. So let's go ahead and create a message, and along the way, I'm going to teach you about aliasing and copying and go into a bit more detail about the way that works. So in Python, because we haven't really covered that in depth, and it's kind of important. So gen birthday list. So what we're going to do is that we're going to simplify these things, but let's just break down the problem. First thing we need to do is generate a list of people, but we actually really don't care about the people, so what we care about is their birthdays. So we're going to generate a list of n birthdays, and then has collision is what I'm going to look for. Birthdays, assuming I can spell. And what that does, has collision will check if the birthdays list has a match in it. So actually I'll call it has match because that makes more sense. And collision, while that makes sense to me, doesn't necessarily make sense to you. Okay. So what we're going to do first is that we're going to knock our assumptions down a bit. First, we're going to assume that we're not dealing with a leap year. So we're going to assume that we have 365 days in a year as opposed to 366. And the reason I'm going to do that is because it actually becomes pretty easy to translate birthdays. We just simply represent birthday as a number between 1 inclusive and 365 inclusive, rather than trying to figure out how to compare April 1st to, or how to randomly generate April 1st or May 2nd. That makes it a bit tricky. So I'm just going to deal with numbers and randomly generating numbers. So we remember that we can do print.random.randint from 1 to 365 to generate a random number. Well, the random.randint will generate a random number between, so it generated 75, so it generates a number between 1 and 365 over here. So what we're going to do is we are going to look for so we're going to just use this function. And we are going to create something called birthday. And then we're going to create a list called birthdays, which is equal to an empty list. So we're going to create a birthday, and we're going to birthdays dot append the birthday to that. So basically we're going to create a list, and then actually we're missing a step. For I in range n. So I'm going to do this. So I was thinking to myself, okay, how do I generate a random birthday? That's how. And how do I add a birthday to a list? That's how. And that's what I need to do n times. So that's what I do. For I in range n, birthday is equal to randint 1 through 365. And that's inclusive because random ranges are inclusive. And then we're just going to add it to the birthdays list. And then we return birthdays. Okay. Next, let's figure out, given a list of birthdays, how do I check to see if there's a match? Well, I'm going to assume that I get a list over here. So how do I check to see if there's a match? So there's an annoying way we could do it, which has nested loops for and this is kind of the annoying way to do it. For I in range for I in range 1 to length of birthdays, for j in range lengths of birthdays, if I is not equal to, I'll explain this in a bit, if I is not equal to j, birthday, if birthdays if birthdays I is equal to birthdays j, return true, return false. So this is the just kind of a straightforward way of doing it, which is for every birthday. So let's go ahead and so for every birthday in the list, I'm going to run through basically this loop twice. So at index 0, I'm going to check indices 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to the whatever it is. If the indices are not equal, then I'm actually going to compare them. If they are equal, I'm just going to skip them. They're being skipped. It'll be skipped because I don't have a condition for what to do if they are equal. So if I and j are at different indices, then I compare the contents of I and j and see if there's a match. Now, the reason I have this in there is that if I and j are the same, it's going to check it. If we don't have this, we would check ourselves, which means that would always be true. So here, if I'm going to write this out, I'm going to basically say, I'm going to grab birthday is equal to birthdays, or I'm going to say this birthday is equal to birthday I. So we're going to get the ith birthday, that's this birthday. And then we're going to check it against every other birthday. And that's represented by the j's. So for each birthday, we're going to extract it as this birthday, and then we're going to check it against every other birthday. And then, yeah. That should do it. Okay. In the next one, I'm going to start getting into the topics that I wanted to go over, which is mutability. And I'm going to also mutability of lists. And I'm also going to go over just an easier way to do this. Because this way, I know basically went, wow. The nested loops are annoying like that. And I mean, You do that a lot. This is actually the classic form for comparing one thing to everything else, or specifically comparing everything in the list to everything else in the list. Happens a lot. But turns out that there's an easier way to do that, so we'll get into that this next video.